What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What Studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. DJLittleRock.com, check availability, and get a free price quote right there. And maybe you can have me entertaining you at your next event. Let me entertain you. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Let's learn some stuff right here on the program. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today for Thursday, February 13th, 2020. 10 things you need to know today. 1. Senate approves Iran War Powers Resolution in bipartisan vote. The Senate voted 51-45 on Wednesday to limit President Trump from pursuing military action in Iran without congressional approval. 8 Republicans sided with all Democrats to approve Senator Tim Kaine's Democrat Virginia resolution. Senators Bernie Sanders, Independent Vermont, Elizabeth Warren, Democrat Massachusetts, and Amy Klobuchar, Democrat Minnesota, didn't vote as they were likely on the presidential campaign trail. And recent 2020 dropout Senator Michael Bennet, Democratic Colorado, didn't vote either. Trump tweeted earlier Wednesday to encourage senators to vote against the resolution, saying, quote, "This is not the time to show weakness," end quote, to Iran. It comes as Trump continues to escalate tensions with Iran after authorizing a strike that killed top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Trump is expected to veto the bill. This is according to CNN and Politico. Number 2, Barr to testify to House as Democrats question Stone sentencing move. Attorney General William Barr has agreed to testify before the House Judiciary Committee on March 31st as questions mount about the Justice Department's decision to overrule prosecutors and recommend a light sentence for President Trump's longtime advisor, Roger Stone. Democrats on the committee said Wednesday in a letter to Barr confirming the arrangement that they plan to discuss concerns about, quote, the misuse of our criminal justice system for political purposes, end quote. The announcement came a day after all 4 prosecutors involved in the Stone case quit when the Department of Justice overruled their sentencing recommendation of 7 to 9 years for Stone, who was convicted of lying to Congress and other charges. On Wednesday, Trump congratulated Barr on Twitter, quote, for taking charge, end quote, of the case. This is according to the House Judiciary Committee. Number 3, several GOP senators criticized Trump tweets on Stone sentencing. Several Republican senators on Wednesday said President Trump should not have criticized prosecutors for recommending up to 9 years in prison for Roger Stone, a longtime Trump advisor who was convicted in November of lying to Congress and obstructing the Russia investigation. Quote, I don't think he should be commenting on cases in the system, end quote, said Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican South Carolina. Quote, I don't think it's appropriate, end quote. Several other senators, including Collins, Republican Maine, and John Kennedy, Republican Louisiana, made similar comments. On the same day as Trump's tweet, the Justice Department said it would overrule the recommendation and propose a lighter sentence. 4 prosecutors quit the case after the announcement, and Democrats called for investigation. This is according to USA Today. Number 4, Deval Patrick ends presidential campaign. Former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick ended his campaign for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination on Wednesday. Patrick, the last African-American candidate in the Democratic field, entered the race late but failed to draw significant support. He never attracted enough donors or polling support to qualify for a spot on the debate stage. He placed second to last with 0.4% of the vote on Tuesday's New Hampshire primary. Quote, the vote in New Hampshire last night was not enough for us to go on the next round of voting, end quote, Patrick said in a statement. Two other Democrats, Andrew Yang and Michael Bennet, dropped out on Tuesday as the remaining candidates moved on to campaign for the next contests in South Carolina and Nevada. This is according to the Associated Press and NBC Boston. Number 5, confirmed coronavirus cases soar as China changes diagnostic rules. Chinese public health officials on Thursday reported a huge increase in the number of coronavirus cases in Hubei province on Thursday. The 14,840 new cases, lifting total infections to about 60,000, marked a tenfold increase over the number reported a day earlier. The 242 new deaths more than doubled the most recorded in a single day. It was not immediately clear what the figures indicated about how fast the flu-like virus was spreading, because the spike came after the Health Commission in Hubei, the epicenter of the virus, changed its diagnosis criteria for confirming cases, giving doctors more discretion in identifying new cases. Still, the news cooled hopes that the spread of the epidemic was slowing, halting a rally in Asian stock markets. This is according to the South China Morning Post and Reuters. Number 6, China shakes up Hubei leadership amid questions about virus response. China's Communist Party on Thursday fired several senior officials in Hubei province, the center of the new coronavirus outbreak, in a move to firm up Beijing's control of the response to the outbreak. The Central Committee said Jiang Shaoling, Hubei's party secretary since 2016, will be replaced by Shanghai Mayor Ying Yang, an ally of Chinese President Xi Jinping. The Communist Party also fired Ma Guokeng, party boss in the city of Wuhan, where the coronavirus outbreak originated. Chinese citizens have complained about how long it took the government to acknowledge the outbreak, saying a slow response allowed the virus to spread. The number of confirmed cases jumped to nearly 50,000 in Hubei alone, and about 60,000 overall cases, and 1,367 deaths. This is according to the Washington Post. Number 7, Iowa Democratic Party chair resigns. Iowa Democratic Party chair Troy Price resigned Wednesday following the state's chaotic caucuses, the first contest in the presidential primary season. Quote, Democrats deserved better than what happened on caucus night, end quote, Price wrote in a resignation letter to fellow party leaders. Quote, as chair of this party, I am deeply sorry for what happened and bear the responsibility for any failures on behalf of the Iowa Democratic Party, end quote. Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez angrily called on the state party to recanvass after a delay due to problems with a smartphone app used to report results. He said Wednesday it would recanvass precincts as requested by the campaigns of Senator Bernie Sanders, independent Vermont, and former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who both claimed victory. This is according to the Wall Street Journal and NPR. Number 8, Marie Yovanovich says State Department leaders lack moral clarity. Former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovich, on Wednesday told an audience at Georgetown University that the State Department is, quote, in trouble, end quote, with leaders lacking, quote, policy vision, end quote, and, quote, moral clarity, end quote. Yovanovich was ousted from her post last May, following what her supporters have called a smear campaign orchestrated by President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. She retired from the State Department last month and told the crowd that when it comes to foreign policy, the U.S. needs to be, quote, principled, consistent, and trustworthy. To be blunt and amoral, keep them guessing foreign policy that substitutes threats, fear, and confusion for trust cannot work over the long haul, end quote. Yovanovich was at Georgetown to accept an award from the School of Foreign Service and received a standing ovation. This is according to CNN and The Guardian. Number 9, deficit rises 25% in first 4 months of fiscal 2020. The federal deficit hit $389.2 billion in the first 4 months of the 2020 fiscal year, a 25% increase over the same period the previous year. The shortfall over those 4 months is already roughly 40% of the entire 2019 deficit of $1.06 trillion. The government is bringing in more, with receipts totaling $1.18 trillion through January, up from $1.1 trillion in the same period a year earlier. But spending is up by more, hitting $1.57 trillion in the first 4 months of the new fiscal year, compared to $1.42 trillion last year. President Trump has said economic growth would pay the cost of his tax cuts, but GDP growth slowed from 2.9% in 2018 to 2.3% in 2019. This is according to CNBC. Number 10, Trump says Duterte's curbing of U.S.-Philippines military ties not a problem. President Trump on Wednesday brushed off Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte's announcement that he would end a 2-decade-old military arrangement that let U.S. soldiers train in the country. Quote, "I don't really mind if they would like to do that. It will save a lot of money," end quote. Trump told reporters at the White House, quote, "My views are different from others," end quote. Trump often calls for bringing home American military personnel stationed overseas. He also consistently presses allies to pay more for their own defense, including that provided by U.S. troops. An Asia Times analysis, however, warned this week that Duterte's decision was a, quote, "shock move," end quote, that could severely hurt U.S.-Philippine ties and, quote, have ramifications for the region's strategic balance of power, including in the hotly contested South China Sea, end quote. The Sears and the Washington Post. That's 10 things you need to know today for Thursday, February 13th, 2020. Thank you for listening to What Makes You Smarter. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for this edition of What Makes You Smarter. It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at SmarterWhat, and YouTube, username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/Keys Dan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening.